Welcome back. We are broadcasting from the site of the 2024 GOP convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Joining me now is the 56th Speaker of the House of Representatives and the Chairman of the convention, Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, good to see you.
Hey, Tony. Good to see you, as always.
It's been a while, huh?
Yeah, not really, but it was great to see you anyway.
All right. Following Saturday's assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump, there were immediate calls for investigations into potential security lapses, but there was also a recognition that the political rhetoric in our country has really reached a crisis point. You were actually on the national media yesterday discussing that.
Yes, it's a tinderbox right now. It is, and the reason is because the rhetoric has been so hot. I mean, I pointed out, I was on CNN just a few moments before the president went live with his remarks, and I told the group there, I said, listen, it is a fact that our Democrat colleagues have painted Donald Trump out to be the enemy of freedom. I mean, they use this language all the time. If he's elected, it's the end of democracy. It's the end of the republic. You could tell people that enough, and they begin to actually believe it, and it spurs on what has now become political violence. Now, there's offenders on both sides of the aisle, of course, right? And I'm the first to point that out, and I've been doing that consistently since I got to Congress.
I was going to say, you had an effort, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago?
8 years ago. We started the Honor and Civility Caucus.
How we lose track of time.
Yeah, the commitment to civility was a document I drafted as a freshman in Congress that basically was a one-page restatement of the Golden Rule. We treat one another with dignity and respect. Of course, we're going to have vigorous debates and vehement opposition on policy, but the people inside the building are not our enemies, right? Our enemies are like Hamas and Hezbollah and the people trying to kill us. Your political opposition is not your enemy. And the whole secret to our system, the way it's supposed to work, is you have vehement opposition, but you have vigorous debate, and then you move forward. And we've got to do that. We've got to get back to that.
But you just said something that's very important, the vigorous debate.
Yes.
The discussion. And this is something that has come about in this Congress.
Yes.
That was central to allowing the minority, meaning not just the Democratic minority, but even the minority within the Republican Party or some of the voices having a say in the process, being able to amend bills on the floor, being able to represent their constituents. That's something that we have lost in this country, in the media and in Congress, and I think that is fueling this divide.
It is. I mean, you hear me talk a lot about trying to restore regular order to Congress, and that's part of it.
But it's been ugly, hasn't it?
It has been, yeah, it has been.
But you've suffered through it.
I have suffered through it. Yes, you've noted. Yes, I've taken a few arrows for this, but we're going to keep steady hands at the wheel, and we're going to continue to articulate what I believe to be, the secret of our system, the way it works. These core principles are something we can't abandon. We do it at our peril.
But it's a messy process.
It is a messy process. Democracy is a messy process, as is often noted, but it's still the greatest system in the history of the world, and we're 248 years into this grand experiment in self-governance. We have to keep it. We're the stewards of it. We know how. We got to be consistent in that.
So we sidestep the messiness at our own peril.
Yes, right, exactly. That's a good point. If you put a lid on it, so to speak, then the pressure builds, right? You got to allow for that vigorous debate, but it's got to be within the confines of that system, and that's important to maintain.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, you and I have known each other a long time, and I know your heart is sincere in this because, as I said, you pointed this out as a freshman. I've been doing it as well. But let's talk about practically speaking. How do we, our viewers, our listeners, how do we as Americans, let's start with the right. Let's not point fingers on the left and say you need to do that. What do we need to do?
Look, we need to change our perspective a bit. We need to understand that our fellow Americans, we're all part of the same country. We're all brothers and sisters in that regard. I mean, if you look at it biblically, as you and I do, I mean, you're supposed to love your enemies, right? Much less your fellow countrymen. You love your neighbor as yourself, as we're admonished in the scripture to do. If you do that, it solves a lot of problems. You just kind of follow that worldview, and it dictates your behavior and how you treat others.
Doesn't mean we change our perspectives or we abandon truth.
Never.
It just means that we are civil in our conversation.
Right. We never abandon core principles. In the legislative process, sometimes you have to give in on some of your preferences, but that's how it works.
But you build consensus that way.
That's the whole thing.
But again, I go back, vigorous debate, and that's one of the things I've had an issue with here at the RNC with the Platform Committee is having that vigorous debate. I'm not going to talk about that today, I'm going to be talking about it in the days ahead. I'm not letting go of that. But let's talk about the convention. What do we got ahead of us this week?
Well, this is an exciting time. It's a little bit different mood than it might have been,
much
right?
different.
But maybe in a healthy way, Tony. I think people are looking at this in a very sober-minded manner. They understand the stakes are so high for the country. We are truly in an historic moment in the future of our republic.
I think we're at a crossroad, the overused term, a pivotal point, a turning point. This could be the hinge upon which this nation turns, depending on how, I think in particular but in particular, Donald Trump addresses this moment. And he suggested that he's going to take maybe a path less traveled.
I've been so heartened to see his thoughts and comments articulated over the last day or so since the assassination attempt. He seems to have a very clear view of what this meant. God spared his life. I mean, it was a miracle. We all saw it. Everyone saw it. It's hard to deny. And ironically, in history, this is just a footnote to it all, but we used to call George Washington the bulletproof president, remember? Because in the French and Indian War, among other episodes, he was running through that valley and they tried to shoot at him and he took off his coat and he had 4 bullet holes through it, but none of them touched him.
And that was before Kevlar vest.
Yeah, that's right, way before. He was just a colonel in the Army at the time, but he wrote back to his family it was a providential moment that God spared him. Here's the interesting thing. I thought of that immediately upon the event with President Trump, and I went back to read the story again, and it occurred to me. That event took place less than 50 miles from where President Trump was shot, in Pennsylvania, also in July. Now, coincidence, right? But there's providence involved in this as well. President Trump understands that. His language over the last day has been so encouraging to me. He said, effectively, God has given me a chance here. And that is to unify the country. That's his words, not mine. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see how he articulates that and how we meet it out.
I was encouraged to see that. We were praying for that last night. We were here at Day Spring Church right outside of Milwaukee for a prayer meeting last night, and that's one of the things we were praying for, that the president would see this moment, respond to it appropriately, bring this nation forward. Mr. Speaker, when we come back from this break, we're going to talk about breaking news today. A federal court judge, a U.S. District Court judge, dropping the documents case, the big case, quite significant. And we're going to talk about why on the other side of the break, continuing our conversation with House Speaker Mike Johnson as we look ahead to this week's national convention for the Republicans, but also breaking news today that the federal documents case against President Trump was dropped. The judge siding basically with the defense's arguments that the federal prosecutor, the special counsel, was illegally appointed.
Yes, I mean, I think it's the right result. This broke just moments ago. I haven't had a chance to, read the opinion yet. And of course I want to as a former constitutional law litigator. I'm excited to see that. But I would say it's the right result. Obviously, Judge Cannon called this the right way. We've been making lots of noise, complaining and even investigating in the House Jack Smith's abuses of that special counsel office. It is an office that doesn't have a lot of oversight, frankly. And it's supposed to be sort of governed and overseen by Congress, but we've had a limited ability to do so because of the way they've handled it. So this is a great relief to the system, of course, to President Trump, to the country itself, I think. I expect there'll probably be an appeal of that ruling, but I think it's the right result. I look forward to reading it and delving into the details and then seeing what effect that precedent may have on other cases that are pending.
So this is really the checks and the balances where there's been concern about the Department of Justice, the Biden administration weaponizing government.
Yes.
Here you have a judicial branch stepping in saying, yeah, this wasn't done the right way. We have rules for a reason. We need to follow the rules.
That's right. It's lawfare. There's no other way to describe it. They have actually weaponized the system of justice itself, which, as you and I have discussed many times, is a great threat to our republic. Because if you don't have, in a system of, by, and for the people, if the people don't have faith in the justice system, that they don't believe that there actually is equal justice, that Lady Justice has a blindfold on, right, it's a serious problem, and that's undermined the people's faith in that system. And it is one of the things, frankly, that has led to this outgrowth of aggression and anger among the people, that they don't feel like they have that outlet either. This fair court system, this fair legal system. We've got to restore and rebuild that trust. And I think clipping the wings of the special counsel is a big, important part of that.
Let me go back to the assassination attempt on President Donald Trump. immediately following, there were calls for investigation to the Secret Service. There does appear to have been some security lapses, although I think got to be careful, got to let that play out. Has everything become so politicized that we immediately question motives of, these are men and women who are professionals.
Yeah.
I think this political rhetoric may have filtered over into every aspect, that we question everything. We think there's a conspiracy or a motive behind it.
That's the problem. That's part of the problem. Obviously, it does seem that there were some security lapses, but you don't question the motives of the people involved, certainly not instantly, and that's the problem. There has to be a thoughtful investigation and a collection of the facts. I started that, by the way, within hours of the event. I got Secretary Mayorkas, Department of Homeland Security, on the telephone and asked him some very pointed questions. He did not have a lot of the answers at the time that I spoke to him, which is a concern, but we're working on that right now. We're blessed to have, like you're former law enforcement. We got former law enforcement guys in the House Republican Conference. We have a former FBI agent. We got lots of military experts and people who this is their specialty. I'm working with a subset of those members, and we're compiling a list of questions that we must get answered. The first hearings for oversight will be scheduled next Monday when we return to the Hill. We'll begin with the Director of Secret Service, Ms. Cheadle, and there's a lot of things to answer to. Look, Donald Trump is the most persecuted, attacked, and threatened public figure probably in history, at least since Abraham Lincoln. And he's a former president as well, not just a candidate. The idea that they would not have the greatest level of protection on that field this weekend is just unconscionable, and we hope that there are satisfactory answers to the very important questions we have.
Probably final question for you, Mr. Speaker, continuing along this discussion of the what happens in the wake of this assassination attempt, a recognition that the political rhetoric has gotten so intense in this country. I think social media is a factor in it. Everyone wants to get these bombastic messages out there that get lots of likes and follows. And you've talked about this in Congress, how members are, tweeting from inside of meetings, how you have people wanting to be social media figures. Does this have an impact on Congress? Is Congress going to act differently after this?
I will certainly be leading in that regard and in that effort, and I hope that, and I've talked with obviously a number of members of Congress, lots of my colleagues over the last couple of days, and they're deeply concerned about all this as well. We all are. Everybody has a responsibility, certainly those who have a large platform, to set a good example and to use messaging that is productive and helpful. Again, vigorous debates on policy.
Yeah.
I can't wait to trample them on all the disastrous decisions they've made, but it has to be a competition between policies and perspectives and not personalities.
And I think that's the big challenge we've seen in this country, and I've watched it over the last 20 years that I've been at the national level. And it started with the left wanting to silence debate.
Yep.
We need more debate in this country,
Yes.
not less.
Yes, and as conservatives, we don't ever want to censor and silence the other side. We encourage debate, like
Right.
Elijah on the mountaintop, right?
Right.
Because we know the truth can prevail.
Right. Or the fire will come down.
Or one or both.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope and pray you have a great week here in Milwaukee. By the way, I've been here for a week. The people here in Milwaukee are wonderful.
No, it's so hospitable. It's been great.
It's almost, I told some, I'm staying in an Airbnb, and I told the lady next door, I said, I thought I was in the South. People
Feels
are
like
so
Louisiana,
nice here.
doesn't it? Yeah,
Well,
it does.
not quite as humid.
No humid. Yeah, no humidity.
All right, Mr. Speaker, we'll be praying for you this week that you have a great time here at the convention. I know you'll be speaking. What night will you be speaking?
Well, I'm running the proceedings today on the floor, and then I'll be speaking Tuesday night.
All right, well, we'll be watching very closely.